Motions debatable, amendable, and will have priority of consideration in the committee. And in my opinion, debate on that motion should have superseded the agenda today. However, out of respect for our witness and other committee members, I will abide by the agenda as published. So my question to you, sir, is will you provide the opportunity for debate to continue on the question of privilege motion at Thursday's meeting?
Okay, so why don't we get through this, and then I can answer that at the end of today's meeting. I'll leave a little bit of time with the minister, and I'll let you know what the plan is. Okay?
Thank you.
Is that fair enough? Thank you, Minister Boissonnault. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
And thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to be here at committee to address the innuendo and misinformation that has been spread by the opposition over the last few weeks. Mr. Chair, it's the nature of partisan politics that we have vigorous and even fiery debates. It's the job of the opposition to hold the government to account, and I understand this dynamic and I respect it. However, even the rhetoric of a hyper-partisan Conservative Party needs to at least take into account the actual facts of a situation. So let's begin with an essential fact. Canada has one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world for elected officials, and that is exactly what Canadians expect. I've always conducted myself in an ethical manner that follows the spirit and the letter of those rules. On that note, I'm grateful to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner for reviewing the claims made by Mr. Barrett and the media, and for the Commissioner's conclusion that there is no need for his office to look into this matter further. The impartial, independent, and non-partisan body in charge of the rules has made its decision. That should be respected. À ce propos, je remercie le commissaire au conflit d'intérêts.
On that note, I am grateful to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner for reviewing the claims made by Mr. Barrett and the media, and for his conclusion that there is no need for his office to look into this matter further. The impartial, independent, and non-partisan body in charge of the rules has made its decision, and that should be respected. I have always followed my obligations under the Conflict of Interest Act and worked with the Office of the Conflict of Interest Commissioner. Mr. Chair, when I was elected in 2021 and appointed to Cabinet, I began the process of organizing my professional affairs in accordance with the Conflict of Interest Act.
Working with the Commissioner's office, I placed my company, Xenix, and a numbered company that holds investments under the management of a third party as required by the Act. To act as the third party, I chose Ms. Kirsten Poon, who, in addition to being a former employee, has also been a friend of mine for more than a decade and was a person whom I trusted to manage things. My past business and personal relationship with Ms. Poon was, and continues to be, reported to the Ethics Commissioner's office as required by the Act. I would also note that since my election, Xenix has ceased day-to-day operations, and Ms. Poon acts as effectively as an administrator for the companies to ensure that needed tax filing and other paperwork is filed. Despite innuendo to the contrary, I am not a lobbyist. I've never been a lobbyist, and I've never had any interest in being a lobbyist. À l'automne 2021,
in the fall of 2021, as part of the finalization of my affairs as a private citizen, my lawyer informed Global Health Imports that I was stepping down as a director. As Global News articles indicate, it is a company's responsibility to update the relevant federal and provincial business registries in the event of a change of director. However, as this was not done in a timely manner, my lawyer filed the necessary update to ensure that the situation was resolved, which is reflected in both registers. Since my election, I have played no role in GHI's operations. I have no knowledge of the financial or operational status of this company, nor of any of Mr. Anderson's ongoing business ventures.
That some Conservatives have been trying to spread regarding these circumstances. First, there has been much innuendo about the fact that Edmonton International Airport, which was a former client, had meetings with staff in other ministers' offices and also received grants from the Department of Transportation and Prairie's Can since I took office. I want to be clear. I in no way facilitated such meetings. I would also note that the Edmonton International Airport is the 5th largest airport in the country, as well as a major hub for the movement of goods and people. Deuxièmement, il a été noté que j'ai décidé de devenir.
Secondly, it has been noted that I have received income from Ms. Poon's Nevis Group company over the past 2 years. Mr. Chair, I must say that this is known because I disclosed this income to the Ethics Commissioner and then in my public statement in accordance with the rules. I also made it clear that the income I received and disclosed was all for work that I did between 2019 and 2021 as a private citizen. None of this income came from work carried out since I took office, and none was related to the lobbying work of Ms. Poon's company, Navis Group.
Surprised to me, Mr. Chair, that the Conservatives have tried to double down on innuendo and misdirection to try to distract from all of these facts. It appears, unfortunately, to be a deliberate attempt to mislead Canadians by portraying what has been fully disclosed to the Ethics Commissioner as scandalous when no such scandal exists. For them, following the rules, being open and transparent, meeting all the obligations, and having the Ethics Commissioner see no need to evaluate my business affairs are simply inconvenient obstacles that can get in the way of a social media clip. Let's move on to questions, Mr. Chair, after which I'll get straight back to work serving Edmontonians, Albertans, and all Canadians.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. And before I go to Mr. Barrett, I'm just going to remind you, sir, that you are here today because of a motion that was passed by this committee, a majority of members on this committee. Mr. Barrett, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Minister, there's fraud and another Randy in a partner call at your company. What's the other Randy's last name?
So, Mr. Barrett, I do not know the name of that person, as I stated in my opening statements. And before at committee, I have no relationship, no operational role with GHI. I do not know that person in question. That person is not me.
What's your percentage stake in the company?
As has been disclosed in my disclosure to the Commission of Ethics, it is 50% stake in GHI that is held in my holding company.
Who are the partners at the company?
I do not know. It is Mr. Anderson, to my knowledge, is the only administrator of that company.
So,
I have no connection other than holding the shares to that company, Mr. Barrett.
holding half of the shares.
Half of the shares are in my numbered company, as disclosed to the Commissioner of Ethics.
Do you know who holds the balance of the shares?
When I was involved, the last time I looked, it was Mr. Anderson.
So it's your understanding that you and Randy Boissonneau and Mr. Anderson are 50-50 partners in the company.
That is not correct. The shares are held by 2256956 Alberta Limited.
Who owns that numbered
I
company?
do.
Cute.
It's not cute, Mr. Barrett.
There's a question about this other Randy that's been reported. I know the contention, sir, is that you'd like for this to be something that the opposition has created, but this is reported in the media. And the media has uncovered a number of things, including text message exchanges with someone who's named by one of your partners as a partner, and they refer to Randy. And no last name of that Randy is available. The only Randy we know that's involved with the company is a minister in the Trudeau government. Who were the partners in that company in 2022?
I do not have that information, Mr. Barrett, but let me correct the record, Mr. Chair. To your question, I'll go through you, Mr. Chair. I am not the person in those texts. Mr. Anderson confirmed that it's not me. And I have a quote from the article that you're talking about, Mr. Barrett, which is from the Gowie Group, which says, "We have had no direct communication with Mr. Boissonneau at any point in our dealings with Stephen and the companies because I have had no active role in GHI since I was elected in 2021.
Okay. You said publicly you didn't have anything to do with Stephen Anderson's business deals on behalf of your PPE company, Global Health Imports. Is that right?
I have had no active role in GHI since I was elected. And Mr. Barrett, you said yourself in your question this morning, Mr. Chair, may I answer?
Chair, I gave.
Hang on a sec.
So let's stop the clock. Okay.
Go ahead. I'm going to ask Mr. Barrett to continue. He has another question. Minister,
But
prepare
Chair,
for an answer.
but
go ahead.
On the way the meeting's going to run, I gave Mr. Boissonneau more than twice the amount of time to respond to both of my previous questions than I spent in asking the questions. So if I have a short question and the minister wants to run the clock, that's obviously not going to demonstrate fairness.
I think I made that pretty clear at the top of the meeting, Mr. Barrett, that my expectation today, is that as members ask questions, an equal amount of time is going to be given for those responses, Minister. And I ask that all members respect that. I'm not going to be the timekeeper here, other than the 6 minutes. But if I see that a member is going a little bit off in terms of time, then I will intervene. Mr. Barrett,
how much time?
You got 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Go ahead.
Related to deals with the Gowie Group, you didn't have anything to do with the alleged wire fraud?
Mr. Barrett, I have been very clear that I've had no operational dealings with GHI since I was elected. And you, sir, indicated off the start that the Randy in the article was not me.
So that company alleges that you were involved. Are they telling the truth?
That company is not, they're not correct because I've had no correspondence from them. And Mr. Anderson indicates very clearly in this morning's article that that Randy is not me.
So we have text messages implicating you, sir, in this wire fraud, and it was carried out by your business partner to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And one of them reads, and I quote, "What is going on? I just received this from Randy." It's 1314 MST and 1514 EST. It literally takes 10 seconds to complete a transfer. I'm telling you, we are not allocating like this. Please reach out and see what the reason is now. You assured me this was done this morning, first thing, and allowed you to hold this stock today. It's midday and nothing is completed. I'm calling Felix to discuss. Be available for a partner call in 15 minutes, end quote. Sir, it seems like you're trying to conceal your involvement in a matter of fraud. Why?
Michael, Mr. Chair, that is completely beyond the pale. It's completely false, and it's not true. The article states very clearly that the Gowrie Group had no contact with me, which is true, and Mr. Anderson indicated that this is a different Randy. Mr. Barrett, your first name is Michael. Mr. Cooper's first name is Michael. Are we to confuse your two identities here at committee when you ask questions of me that are spurious in nature?
Well,
there's more than one
Mr.
Randy
Chair,
here.
I look forward, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Boissonnault being in opposition and having the opportunity to...
He asked a very long question, Mr. Chair.
Having the opportunity
He asked a very long question. I have more
And I
seconds.
realize that, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So there are
Mr. Chair,
other,
I have time on the clock to answer that question.
There are other texts as well that outline how quickly you wanted this wire transfer to go through.
Mr. Barrett,
And
that is not me, and you cannot
the question-
you cannot state that for the record.
Can
That is
we,
simply not true,
can
Mr.
we
Chair.
just
That
hang
is
on a
not true,
sec.
Mr. Chair.
I'm going to, look, I thought I made my expectation very clear at the beginning that questions will be asked and time will be given to respond to that. I am going to Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, Minister, please don't intervene. I'm going to ask the same of the questioners as well. Mr. Barrett, go ahead. You've got 1 minute and 12 seconds, sir.
Like the lack of respect for procedure at committee, we've seen the same lack of adherence to ethics rules. The minister talked about Canada's stringent ethics rules. His government, of course, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has twice been found guilty of breaking those laws. And that's why we have questions about alleged law breaking by our witness, by the minister. The company has been trying to get the money back, the company that was defrauded of $500,000 from your business. Where did the money from the
Mr. Chair,
chair?
it is
A chair.
Point of order, Chair.
he is not stating facts, and I
But
cannot
he
let
didn't finish
falsehoods
his
go, Mr.
question.
Chair.
You're going to have ample opportunity to
30 seconds was the length
I
of
know
my
you're
question.
protecting his clips, Mr. Chair,
no,
but
I'm
he
not
is stating
actually.
falsehoods.
I'm not actually, Mr. Boissonnault.
So we have a corrupt minister from a corrupt
Ask
government.
not your question.
That is
Point
simply
of
beyond the
order.
pale. Mr.
Mr.
Chair, that
Chair.
is outrageous behavior by that
Mr.
member.
Barrett,
Can I have my time? I've asked for 2 points of order.
I'm going to go on your point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
I have never, in my almost 3 years of public service, seen such disrespect
Point of
by
order.
a minister
Point of order.
for the procedures
Point of
here
order.
at committee. He's constantly talking over the witness, and now he's talking over the chair.
Point of
It is
order.
conduct unbecoming.
I've got your
order.
point of order, Mr. Brock. I appreciate that. Mr. Barrett, you were at 34 seconds in your intervention. So I'm going to ask you to ask your question. And
Point of order.
Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Housefather. on
Mr.
point of
Chair, referring to someone as corrupt is unparliamentary. I would ask that you order it be withdrawn.
order. Sorry, ask that I order it what?
I would ask that you ask Mr. Barrett to withdraw those comments. That is unparliamentary to refer to someone as corrupt.
Yeah, Mr. Barrett, I am going to ask that you withdraw those comments, please.
Alleged corruption by a corrupt government.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. You have had.
That was not a withdrawal, Mr. Chair. That was a doubling down.
We've got a point of order from Mr. Villemure. Go ahead, Mr. Villemure. Allez, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Tous les
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All committee members have accepted to hear from Mr. Boissonnault so that he can explain the situation. And I can't currently understand because everyone's talking on top of each other. That's what I said when we started.
I don't want this to descend into a point where, everybody's talking over each other. And I'm going to enforce that from this. I've been enforcing it, but I'm going to enforce it from this point forward. It's just, it means that we're going to be wasting our time here and not being able to ask the questions that we want. Mr. Barrett, you've had 34 seconds. Do you have a question for Mr. Boissonnault? Because I want to give him an equal amount of time. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Through you, Chair, we'll give the Minister an opportunity for transparency. For a first, Minister, will you provide this committee a copy of the letter notifying in writing that you wanted to be removed as a director from this company? And further, will you provide any financial records related to this company? Will you provide them to the committee?
Mr. Chair, there is a well-established practice done by the Ethics Commissioner that every single member around this table has to go through. The standards are higher for parliamentary secretaries and ministers. I have followed that process to the letter. All of those documents were provided to the Commissioner of Ethics. And, Mr. Chair, the Ethics Commissioner sent me and Mr. Barrett a letter indicating that there was no need. He took the decision that there's no need to look into my business affairs, no need to evaluate them. I have followed the letter to the rule to the letter.
Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. Mr. Barrett. Ms. Damoff, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And before I start, I just have a point of order. Mr. Cooper has just called me disgusting, and I would ask that he please remove that from. I mean, it's not appropriate.
I'm sorry. I was dealing with other issues.
Point of order.
I didn't hear it, Ms. Damoff.
He's done it
I'm
twice,
sorry.
Chair.
Okay.
Point of
Well,
order,
I didn't
Mr.
hear
Chair.
it, so
I
apologize.
Mr. Chair, those who live in glass houses should be very
Okay,
careful
that's
about
not a
throwing
point of
stones.
order, Mr.
It
Brock.
is, because
Thank you.
Ms. Damoff used the very same language towards my colleague, Mr. Cooper. I heard it very clearly on more than one occasion, Chair.
So the chair did not hear it because I was obviously busy dealing with some other issues. So I'm going to ask Ms. Damoff that you continue for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair.
So as to not interrupt her time.
On a point of order, Mr. Barrett.
At the conclusion of, it's a practice at other committees and this one in the past, that when there's a request for documents made, that there's confirmation by the clerk to the witness the information that's been requested. So is the committee to understand that the witness will provide the documents that were requested to the committee or not?
Mr. Boissonneau, will you provide those documents that have been requested by Mr. Barrett?
Mr. Chair, I was very clear in my answer. Any documents related to my affairs as a private citizen before becoming a public office holder have been provided to the Ethics Commissioner and his team, and they have looked at those documents, and the Ethics Commissioner has included there is no need to evaluate my business affairs, point à la ligne.
Okay. So if the committee feels compelled to request those documents, you can do so when you have the floor, Mr. Barrett. Go ahead, Ms. Damoff, please.
Thank you, Chair. On May 7th, CSIS reported that disinformation is the biggest threat to Canadians, and more than 84% of Canadians are somewhat concerned with this issue. And I find it really, I'm really disheartened that the Conservatives would prefer to go on a witch hunt against a Minister of the Crown versus continuing and finishing our study on misinformation and disinformation. Mr. Boissonneau, when you become a minister, is the procedure involved with documentation the same as a member of Parliament? Because I would note none of the opposition members have ever had to complete the documentation. As a parliamentary secretary, I have. I know it's quite extensive. Could you maybe discuss that?
Absolutely, Ms. Damoff. When you become a public office holder, as you have experienced, there's a much different approach from just sending in your annual report as a member of Parliament. There are financial documents. Your partner, your spouse, your significant other, your common law partner get scoped into the process, and it is an intense process so that you comply by the 120-day mark. And in my case, we had to figure out what to do with one holding company, one active business. I got advice from the Commissioner of Ethics that I needed to have a third party, went all through that. And I think the other thing that's really important, Ms. Damoff, is it's my financials, it's investments, it's everything related to my personal life. It's the personal finances of my life and my partner's life that the Commissioner gets to see. And I don't think any of us would want to be poking our noses in other people's personal financial business. That's not, we have a different system. And we have one of the strictest ethics regimes in the world. And so the other thing I'll say before I get you to your next question is it's not just a one-time thing. It's a continual process. I have to constantly decide and make sure that we're complying with the Act, and I recuse myself from nominations and appointments all the time so that I stay on the right side of the Act.
And you have to file annually the reports. And in addition, as part of the conditions when you file those reports, you can't have any knowledge of what's going on. I recall I couldn't even hold shares. I had to move all of any stocks that I owned. I had to either move them into a Bryant trust or have mutual funds. So, and this needs to be filed annually. So to imply that you are somehow still involved would indicate that you've contravened the act, and yet the commissioner has gone through your documents and has vetted it and said no, that you didn't. Is that not correct?
That is absolutely correct. The commissioner has said there is no need to evaluate my business affairs.
So I want to ask you a personal question, Minister Boissonnault. When the Conservatives go on these witch hunts and say things like you're corrupt, or call you disgusting, or say that you're part of a corrupt government, what impact does that have on you and your family?
Well, I can tell you we've had people parked outside of my house for 6 weeks with a threatening vehicle that switches out every 3 to 4 days to comply with the bylaws, that whatever Pierre Poilievre says in the House of Commons gets written all over those windows. And my partner didn't sign up for that, and neither did anybody on my block. And it comes directly from the anger and the fear that the Conservative Party is spreading in this country. And I can tell you, Ms. Damoff, it breaks my heart that you have made the choice that you have made to no longer serve your community and our country, because you are a phenomenal parliamentarian and an amazing parliamentary secretary. And when truth and reason and facts leave this place, it damages democracy. And the decisions made by people around this table have life-altering consequences for people who do not put their name on a ballot. And I do not think that everybody around this table treats Canadians with the respect and care that they should when they become a member of Parliament.
Do you think Canadians expect more of members of Parliament? There's only 338 of it here. I consider it a great privilege to be serving the constituents of Oakville, North Burlington. And when colleagues start accusing others of lying, which is in essence what was happening during the previous testimony, when despite your answers, you were being contradicted by Mr. Barrett. Do you think that it behooves us to behave in a more respectful way to one another?
I think in another time, in another place, with a different Conservative Party, a letter from the Ethics Commissioner clearing a member of Parliament, regardless of party, would have been enough to move on to committee business. And I don't know what's happened at this committee, that it is embroiled in partisan attacks and it can't get onto its own business. But it's a sad day when that's the case. And I can tell you, Pam, what people say to me in the doors. They say, whether you're a member of Parliament, a member of the Legislative Assembly, or a councillor, or a school trustee, we elect you all to get along and to get stuff done for us. And games playing and name calling is not what we want to see. And I was on the doors last weekend and I heard it again. And so we can all hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I hope that we get there in this committee and across government.
I will say that in the past, I used to find committees were the one place where collaboration would take place and where we were able to accomplish, I would say, really great things. We have a study on misinformation and disinformation that I think could be helpful for Canadians, and instead this committee regularly gets deadlocked on the latest gotcha moment. And it's unfortunate that we're stuck in the mud because of accusations. And I thank you for being here today,
Thank
Minister.
you, Ms. Damoff. Thank you, Mr. Boissonnault. Monsieur Villemure, pour 6 minutes. Commencez, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being with us today. My constituents in Trois-Rivières understand my past as an ethicist, and many have followed your testimony here today, and they're wondering what's going on. I would like to give you 2 minutes out of my 6 minutes to tell us more about what brought us here today. That's a great question, Mr. Villemure. In part because of what Ms. Damoff has said. The Conservatives want clips for social media. I re-won my seat in 2021. During the 2 years that I was a private citizen, I divested my company whether I went back to my company, I was by myself in my office. I worked with people on projects. For example, working for the Westminster Foundation for Democracy, I worked in Bolivia to help that country rebuild its democratic institutions. I also worked with an organization in Thailand that wanted to help LGBTQ people. I also founded the Global Equity Caucus, and I am a gay man. I'm a gay parliamentarian, and when I went to international events, I was looking for people like me so that I could have discussions on how to move issues forward for our community. So, me and a couple other people created this network. And when I won my seat, I had agreements, I had clients, and I spoke with the ethics commissioner, and I was told that there needed to be a third party to manage my affairs. I named such a third party. I was always honest. I said that she was registered as a lobbyist. I'd known her for 10 years. I trusted Ms. Poon, and that is why I named her as director. And so she sends the documents to the Revenue Agency every year. The ethics commissioner told me, great, no reason to look into it, and we're here today because Conservatives want to fight, they want more seats, and I'm going to campaign again. I'm going to win because I serve my constituents with integrity. Thank you very much. This touches on my second question on why we're here today, but I would like to add, and I was listening to my colleagues' questions, very intense questions. Why are you here this morning, and why is there so much hatred? I believe that today's Conservative Party is afraid they're not in control of the changes in the world and here, and they are angry. And that brings a certain hatred within the party. And they want to undermine institutions and damage our country. The Conservative leader said that the notwithstanding clause could apply to rights. Is it my rights? Your rights as a Francophone? The rights of trans people? Indigenous people? How will that notwithstanding clause be used? I can't believe that today's Conservative Party is so angered by things that they can't control, like climate change. They deny climate change, and instead of finding a solution to something that we can clearly see with forest fires, they simply want to say no. They want to go back to a country that no longer exists. And I think that they will do everything that they can to win seats, and I will stop them from doing that at Edmonton Centre. Thank you, Mr. Minister. And 2 questions. What can I say to the people of Trois-Rivières in one sentence? We heard from Mr. Boissonneau, and here's what he had to say. So that's my first question. Actually, I'll let you respond. He followed all the rules. Okay, that's simple. In your view, is there any improvements that can be made with the ethics commissioner to avoid such a situation? Mr. Villemure, I believe you have a PhD in ethics. You suggest a great many studies here at this committee, and I think that any system can be improved. But I can say that we need to communicate to Quebecers and Canadians how the system works and how there is oversight of our files by the ethics commissioner. I think Canadians would feel good knowing that our system is robust. And you believe that the system works well. Well, I worked within the system that we have, and if the committee wants to suggest changes to the system, they can. But I can say that I've always followed the rules. I work closely with the ethics commissioner and his team, and that is why I've been able to respond to your question that was very clear. Minister Boissonneau followed all the rules. Yes, I followed the rules to the letter. it's important if we want to bring people towards democracy, they need to know that we have systems in place to separate public and private responsibilities. And it's important for me to follow the rules. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau. Thank you, Mr. Villemure. Next question to Mr. Green for 6 minutes. You have the floor.
Minister Boissonneau, in your time between your last elected position and your most recent election, I'm to understand it was how long?
I was elected in 2015, and I lost the 2019 election, and I won the 2021 election.
So in 2 years, you created a company that was essentially a consultancy. Is that correct?
No, I had a consultancy from about 1999 until the time that I was first elected in 2015, when I made sure that the company...
In your 2 years, what was the nature of the business that you created here?
So I didn't create a new business, Mr. Green. I simply restarted my business, Zenix, which is a management consultancy. And as I indicated to Mr. Villemure, I had many clients. And my forte, if you can use that...
What experience did you have in procurement and PPF?
So with respect to that company, which I have no more work to do with, we were at the time of a pandemic. And we were at the time of a great
What
call.
experience did you have prior to this procurement that involved PPF and procurement?
15 years in business, Mr. Green. I was able to make sure that we had products supplied to my community. I had 15 years in business. This was a decision to start a business. There were tens of thousands of businesses started up during the pandemic to help our country and our community, and this business was one of them.
Okay, so you got into procurement to take advantage of the opportunities that were presented in COVID, perhaps your relationships with the Liberal government.
I wouldn't say that.
And you had...
Order, Chair. Mr. Boissonneau, Mr. Green was in the middle of his intervention asking a question. I'm going to ask that you let him finish, and you'll be given an equal amount of time to respond. Mr. Green, go ahead. I did stop your clock.
In your earlier testimony, you stated that the Gowie Group had no contact and that the article states in reference to the text that they mentioned to Randy. It is stated in this article that you've referenced to refute to the Conservatives' claims that it was Gouli's understanding that Anderson was referring to Boissonneau, whom Anderson had told her was a partner at GHI and a public official, a representative of Gouli Group wrote in a statement. So there's an obvious contradiction here that is public. And while it is true, you may want to appear before this committee and act as though this is simply a Conservative witch hunt. I would tell you from my perspective as a New Democrat, this doesn't pass the sniff test. So please explain this very obvious contradiction between your testimony and what is being stated here.
Mr. Chair, thanks, Mr. Green. And Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Green, there are some baseless comments in your intervention. And let me just be really clear. I had nothing to do with the Gowie Group. I have no ongoing role in this company and haven't since I was elected. The article itself, and I'll repeat, says we have had no direct communication with Mr. Boissonneau at any point in our dealings with Stephen and the companies. That's from the Gowie Group. Mr. Anderson confirmed in the article that I am not the Randy in question. And so I would also say that, you put words in my mouth and said take advantage. I never said that, and nor did I say the W word, because I'm very careful to use that word. I am here to answer questions as the Ethics Committee has asked me to do. And
sir, listen.
Sure.
That's all great, but you're providing contradictory testimony. The nature of your dealings with a business model that you have no previous experience with, given the case of the size and the scope of the procurement, raises questions to the average Canadian. It raises questions to an objective person looking at this deal when in your own testimony you're stating you're not even aware of who the ownership is. So who is the other Randy?
So, Mr. Green, I stated this earlier to Mr. Barrett. I do not know the name of this person. I have no operational role in that company. I do not have any line of sight to who operates the company, and I would not be able to because of the very strict rules in ethics. And I will state very clearly that I had 15 years of business experience with
Okay,
clients, and
I'll
I was
state
able
very
to.
clearly, sir,
I was able to
that
translate
you
that into
decided
something
to
help the
list
community.
Kristen Poon's company as 2050-877 Alberta Limited on your disclosure forms and not include the trade name of the Navis Group. That, to me, sir, no matter how much you want to obfuscate, looks like a mission that is intentional. So would you agree that receiving direct payments from a registered lobbyist would appear to show a conflict of interest?
No, Mr. Green, two things there. When I was a private citizen, I worked with a company, numbered company, that after I became elected, changed its trade name to the Navis Group. And moreover, I was required to use the legal name of the company in my ethics disclosure forms, and that was a directive by the commissioner's team. And when I first did my disclosure with the ethics commissioner, as I explained to Ms. Damoff, the company that I was aware of was still the numbered company, and I wasn't aware
Mr.
of the name
Bossino,
change.
I've operated a business myself, sir, and in these types of disclosures, you would put an operating as. You would put an operating as to give disclosure about the nature of the company so it could be cross-referenced against procurement. So why then have a deferred payment arrangement made? And how long will you be receiving payments from the Navis Group?
Mr. Green, just to be clear, it was very stated in a response to Global News by the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner that they required me to use the numbered company, not the operating name. And when I worked with that numbered company, it did not have an operating as. It was simply a numbered
But I
company.
filled out those sheets too. You could put in the section operating as. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to be forthcoming or not.
I think I've answered this question, and it was a requirement.
Very quick response.
It was a requirement to use the numbered company, and I have provided all information regarding my financial affairs and my business affairs to the Ethics Commissioner,
Thank you.
who has said there's no need to look into my affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Green. That completes round one. We're going to go to the 5-minute rounds and then 2.5. Just a reminder, equal time of question for equal time of answer. I don't want anybody interrupting each other. Wait till the question is asked, wait till the answer is given, and if I have to intervene, I will, in order to move along. Mr. Cooper, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Boissonnault, you held the title of partner at GHI before you were elected, correct?
I recall, I actually can't remember that, but partner was the title that I used while I was operating the company.
Thank you.
Mr. Cooper.
Thank you for confirming that. And just GHI is not exactly a big operation. There was you, there was Anderson, and there were a few employees, correct?
Correct.
And so I pose to you, through you, Mr. Chair, then who was the other Randy?
I do not know who the other Randy was. They were somebody hired
Thank you.
after
You
I
say
was.
you
but
claimed
I do not know who that person
it was
is, Mr.
4
Chair.
seconds, 4 seconds. Mr.
Sure.
Cooper, go ahead.
You have a 50% stake in the company. There's only a handful of people there, and you presently have a 50% stake in GHI, and you mean to tell me that you have no idea out of a handful of people, if not you, who the other Randy is. Are you serious?
20 seconds. Go ahead, Minister.
I have had no operational involvement in this company since I was elected. The company has hired and probably let go people since I was there. I am not allowed to know about the operation of this company, Mr. Cooper, because it is not permitted by the Ethics Commissioner,
Minister,
and so I followed all the rules.
Thank you for that. Minister, that is nonsense, and you know it. But I'm going to go
It's not
to
nonsense,
the text.
Mr. Chair. That is
Mr.
not a fair statement. It's not nonsense. It is the
Let
truth.
him finish, please.
Sure.
Mr. Boissonnault. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Minister, your answer simply doesn't add up. But there's more to it than that, because if it's some other Randy, then why did the Gowie Group believe that the Randy referenced in the text messages was you? Why?
15 seconds, Minister.
Mr. Chair, it would be inappropriate for me to have anything to do with operational matters. I stepped away from the company in the fall of 2022. Of course, I don't know who the employees are. And in the article today, it says that I am not that Randy.
He's got 3 seconds. Go ahead, Minister.
I am not the Randy in this article, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Doesn't add up, Minister. And if it's not you, How is it that Global News couldn't verify who Verandi was? Anderson said there was some other Randy in charge of logistics, but when Global News looked into it, they found that the guy who held himself out as responsible for logistics is one Edward Anderson, not a Randy.
Mr. Cooper, I have no operational relationship to that company, and so the matters of staff are not in my purview. And let me state again for the record, from this morning's article, from the Gowie Group, we have had no direct communication with Mr. Bossino at any point in our dealings with Stephen and the companies, and Mr. Anderson has said that Randy is not me, and I have not received any communication from
Mr. Cooper, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Minister, in looking at the text message from Randy to Anderson, it states it's 15:14 Eastern Standard Time. This is a text to someone who is in Alberta in a text message about a client in California. What is 15:14 Eastern Time? Well, it happens to be the time zone of Ottawa. Just another coincidence, Randy?
I mean, I have no idea because I did not receive those texts, and I have no operational relationship to this company.
Be available
it's
for
a time zone
Mr. Cooper, just let
in
him
a text.
respond, please.
It's a time zone in a text that I have nothing to do with.
Well,
Mr. Anderson has said that's not
it's another
me.
It's another
Mr. Gowie,
piece.
Mr.
It's
Chair,
another
Mr.
piece.
Cooper,
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
I am
Cooper.
not being
Doesn't add up.
interrupted.
Mr. Cooper, he's got like 8 seconds. Let him respond, please. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank
Boissonneau,
you,
and
Mr.
then you can
Chair.
ask your next
I am
question.
not the Randy in question. Mr. Anderson has indicated that I'm not the Randy in question, and the Gowie Group has said they've had no
Mr.
communication
Cooper,
with me.
go ahead.
And so not only Eastern Time, Ottawa, also be available in 15 for a partner call. You said you had previously been a partner. Just another coincidence? Just another Randy?
The operational word in your statement, Mr. Cooper, is previously. I ceased to be an officer and a director of GHI in October of 2021, full stop.
Go ahead, you got 25 seconds.
Minister, Gowie Group thinks it's you. Global News can't track down who the other Randy is. The Randy who's texting happens to be referencing Eastern Time. You happen to be a member of Parliament serving a lot of your time in Ottawa. You said you were a partner. The text message references a partner. This is a small operation. You have a 50% stake, and the fact that you can't identify who the other Randy is doesn't pass the smell test. And if there isn't another
Thank you,
Randy,
Mr.
then
Cooper.
you, sir, broke the law.
Mr.
Thank you.
Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
May I
That's the-
respond, Mr. Chair?
It's the end of the time. You can respond in the next round. Mr.
Sure.
Fisher, go ahead, 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Can I start with a point of order? Like, you're out of order, Mr. Cooper.
No,
You can't
Mr.
make
Fish, that's not a-
comments like that.
That's
No,
not a
I-
point
I
of
just-
order.
Okay.
That's not a point of
Respond
order.
to point of
Mr.
order.
Fisher,
Fine.
you have 5 minutes. Go ahead. Start your intervention, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. All MPs, backbench MPs, opposition MPs, parliamentary secretaries, and ministers all have forms that they would need to fill out for the Ethics Commissioner. Can you talk about what is required of a minister? You've been a PS as well. Talk about the strict requirements of a minister. You talked about in your opening statements of taking the necessary steps under the Conflict
Sure.
of Interest Act. You talked about some of those steps. I tried really, really hard to pay attention and follow, but there were so many interruptions. I'm going to ask you if you could just outline, and I've never been a minister, probably never will be a minister, but I'd like to know maybe a little bit about what some of those, that higher level of scrutiny is that you have to put yourself forward that perhaps myself and other members of this committee haven't.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Fisher. And look, the scrutiny is intense. You've got 120 days to comply off the start. And if a minister has stocks, you have to sell them. If your partner has stocks, your life partner has stocks, you have to sell them. You can only hold mutual funds, and you have to make sure that there's no operational connection between you and any businesses or nonprofit associations that you would have operated at some point. And so in my case, it was not just make sure that everything was compliant with the Act in the first 120 days. When you're a minister, it's a constant, compliance isn't an endpoint. It's a process. It's fluid. And what's important to note is that I have made the decision, rightly, to recuse myself on appointments and nominations. I've always been very careful to make sure that I respect the rules that are set up by the Commissioner of Ethics, and the Commissioner of Ethics himself has said that I follow the rules and there's no need to look into my business affairs.
Thank you, Minister. And I appreciate the clarity that you've provided through that statement. You've probably heard of the news about Conservative MP Brendan Leslie crafting and circulating a fake news video online. I can see why, and you're an interruption today into our misinformation, disinformation, malinformation study, which I had found as a new member of this committee to be absolutely super interesting. Notwithstanding the fact that...
Mr. Fisher, I've stopped your clock there.
Thank you.
I'm just going to remind you that it was a majority of the committee that voted to have Mr. Boissonneau here as part of this study. So it's not an interruption of anything. This was a decision of the committee, and he is here, as will the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner be here, because a motion was passed by this committee. I just want to clarify that for you, okay? Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Chair. Mr. Boissonneau, in my remaining time, is there anything else that you would like to put forward on the record?
I think I'll restate that I'm not a lobbyist. I've never been a lobbyist. Never registered as a lobbyist because I never wanted to be a lobbyist. And, to your other question, Mr. Fisher, I hope that the committee will be able to get back to the business at hand. And I'm happy to appear here so that people understand that the Commissioner of Ethics looked into, asked me for information. I provided that information, and the Ethics Commissioner said there's no need to look into my business affairs.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, I would suggest that calling relevance on me, and in this particular instance, when there has been very little call of relevance to many, many members of this committee recently, I would take some umbrage with that.
And you can, and I was clearly explaining and reminding you that it wasn't a matter of relevance. It was a matter of the fact that a motion had been passed by this committee. You still have a minute and 38 seconds. Okay. Monsieur Fortin pour 2 minutes et 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
2.5 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Boissonneau. I've been listening to the different questions. The Ethics Commissioner told you that there were no issues, that there was no need to investigate. Have you had any discussions with the Lobbying Commissioner? For the first question, yes, it has been confirmed by the Ethics Commissioner that he doesn't have to look at my private affairs. Regarding the Lobbying Commissioner, I have received nothing from the Commissioner. No communication from the Lobbying Commissioner. I follow the rules. I'm an elected official, and I had a role as parliamentary secretary. I'm in that 5-year period. I've never been a lobbyist. I've never been registered as a lobbyist. And so I've not received anything from the Lobbying Commissioner. I understand. And I understand that you never wanted to be a lobbyist. But that doesn't mean that you might not have violated lobbying rules. But have you made a request to the Lobbying Commissioner? Have you asked about your situation, whether or not it would be problematic? Have you tried to examine this further with the Lobbying Commissioner? Answer: I've always followed the rules since I became parliamentary secretary, and there was no need to confirm that I followed the rules because I follow the rules. I believe that Ms. Poon is a registered lobbyist, correct? Yes. Has she spoken to you on the matter of your activities and whether or not they follow the lobbying legislation? I was always clear with her and with clients that I would never organize a meeting with a government official, and I would never participate in an event with an official, and I have never done so. your company was in discussions with the Edmonton airport, and during those activities, did you participate? No, I never participated in meetings with the federal government and Edmonton Airport. I never organized meetings for the airport with the federal government because that would have gone against my responsibilities. Thank you, Mr. Boissonneau.
Go ahead.
Minister, when was the last time you had a conversation with Kristen Poon?
Earlier this week. We are friends, and we've known each other for 15 years.
So you chat. How frequently would you suggest that you are in communication with Ms. Poon?
Depending on the time of the year or what's going on in our friend circle, we would communicate a couple of times a month, perhaps, if not more.
And Ms. Poon is a registered lobbyist.
She is no longer a registered lobbyist. My understanding is that her registry, she ceased to be a lobbyist in June of 2022.
And you received payments from her prior to that?
That is not true. What happened is that work that I did while I was a private citizen, we made sure that all of the dealings that I had as a private citizen
when was the
were
last
provided
payment
to
you received
the
from Ms.
Commissioner of
Poon?
Ethics.
When was the last payment you received
Mr.
from
Green,
Ms.
you
Poon?
know that there's a process for that, and that information is with the Commissioner of Ethics, and the Commissioner of Ethics...
So you're refusing to answer a basic question, Randy, that would help provide some light to this topic? When was the last time you received money from her?
There were no monies were received by any company that I'm responsible for from Ms. Poon in 2024.
That wasn't the question I asked. When was the last time you received money? 2023?
Mr.
2022?
Green,
When was
that
it?
matter is with the Conflict of Interest Commission. I provided everything to them, and the Ethics Commissioner has said there's no need to look into my affairs.
Well, that's great. We'll talk to him next and certainly look at the loopholes that are in that. Why did you decide to have a deferred payment arrangement?
Mr. Green, that is a relationship that was done while I was a private citizen, and I shared all that information with the Ethics Commissioner. The Ethics Commissioner has
Did you not
made it very
receive money
clear
while you were a private
that
citizen?
There's no need to look into my business affairs.
Did you not receive payment while you were a private citizen?
I received income as a private citizen while I was making a living as a business person, yes.
So at some point you decided with a deferral agreement. When did you make that decision?
Mr. Green, that information has been provided to the Ethics Commissioner, and the Ethics Commissioner has looked at my business affairs and said there's no need to look into them.
Has the CRA?
Hold on, Mr. Green, I've stopped the clock. I have a point of order from Mr. Barrett.
Does the procedure committee not require that a witness answer a question? Not knowing the answer to a question, providing an answer that isn't satisfactory to the member asking, are not open to debate. However, refusing to answer a question of a parliamentarian at committee is and has been found to be a contempt of the parliamentarian's right who has put the question. So, Chair, a refusal to answer a question, it is a fact that is not permissible. I put to you, Chair, that the minister is refusing
Mr.
to
Chair,
answer
I
the
am not
member's
refusing
question,
to answer any question here today.
and that's
Thank you,
not
Mr.
acceptable. That's not
Mr.
acceptable.
Barrett, we dealt with this with Mr. Warnick, and I certainly, when he was here, I clearly stated that the expectation of the committee is that the witnesses will provide an answer to the question. I'm going to leave it to Mr. Green here in the very short period that he has left to conclude this round, and then we're going to go to quick second rounds or other rounds here. But the expectation is that the ministers will answer, and then it'll be up to the committee to decide if they're not satisfied with those answers, then they can take action.
On the
Mr.
same
Barrett.
point of order?
Go ahead, Mr. McKinnon. Sorry, Mr. Green.
Thank
we
you,
got another
Mr. Chair.
point.
I would like to comment that the minister has not refused to answer any questions. He's given
that's debate. That's debate,
I'm
Mr.
responding
McKinnon.
to the point of order.
Yeah,
the allegation is false. He's given answers. They just don't like the answers.
Thank you.
On the point of order, sir?
Okay, Mr. Green, on the point of order, go ahead.
Given that I'm the part of the topic of the point of order, I reserve the right to also submit to you, sir, that he has refused to provide answers to this committee. He's done it on multiple occasions in 2 minutes and 23 seconds. And I would like to say that is what I would consider to be a breach of the powers of this committee. And I would suggest to you that nobody, whether they be a parliamentary secretary or a cabinet minister, is above the procedures of a standing committee. That is why he's here before us, Mr. Chair. So I would ask through you on this point of order that the member provide in writing, and he can refer to the Hansard for the subject of the questions that I've asked him, a response, sir. Failing to do which puts him in breach, in my opinion, to the standing orders and powers of this committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. And on that, I am going to ask the clerk, on behalf of yourself, sir, to review the Hansard and to submit the questions that have been asked of Mr. Boissonnault and have him respond to the committee. Madam Clerk, just make a note of the time on that. And I will ask.
How much time do I have left in my round?
You have 15 seconds by my clock, but
okay, I'm going to ask
that you continue, sir. Go ahead.
With my 15 seconds left, I would say that in the opening remarks, the minister suggested that somehow this was a conservative witch hunt. I would share with you that as a New Democrat and somebody responsible
I said no such thing.
For as a person on this committee, on the Ethics Committee, and a proud New Democrat, I'd share that's not the case. And I just say, Randy, your testimony today has not helped you out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. We're going to go to Mr. Brock. I am going to limit it to 3-minute interventions at this point. I apologize to the committee for that, followed by Mr. Housefather, and that'll conclude the time that we have. That'll take us to 12:06, which is roughly the time where we started, not taking into account many of the interruptions that we've had. Mr. Brock, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. With respect, Minister, I share MP Green's latter comments that your testimony has not been helpful. In fact, not only have you been disrespectful, you are exhibiting traits in my old career that I would classify as a lying witness. You've been evasive.
That's not appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Well, it is.
That's not parliamentary language.
I would suggest, Mr. Brock, that you not use that language.
You've got the inability to tell the straight facts and to tell the straight goods, Minister. There lacks the ring of truth in what you have to say.
Go ahead on your point of order, Mr.
Mr. Brock's language is definitely unparliamentary. He needs to withdraw it, and he needs to apologize.
I'm not withdrawing, Chair.
No, he used a different context. I'm going to allow him to do it. I'm going to ask him to continue. You've got a couple minutes, Mr. Brock. Go ahead.
Sorry, on the same point of order.
Go ahead, Ms. Damoff, on the same point of order.
I've heard in the House many times the Speaker say that you can't say indirectly what you, that you can't say directly, and that is exactly what Mr. Brock has done, and we cannot call each other liars or providing untruths to Parliament.
I appreciate that. I think Mr. Brock understands your point of order. I'm going to ask him to continue for the next couple of minutes. Go ahead.
And Canadians are watching. They take particular attention every time a minister appears at committee. And what you've done, sir, is just displayed a complete lack of respect for policies and procedures at this committee, leaving aside the evasiveness of your responses and clearly the lack of ring of truth, as I've indicated. So on the issue of what was reported this morning in the global news, did you take it upon yourself to reach out to your former partner and ask for clarification as to who this other Randy was?
So, Mr. Brock, on that particular point,
yes
I have
or
no
no, sir? Did you reach? I've got 3 minutes.
I have seconds to
Sir,
respond to
I've
your.
got
Mr. Chair,
3
I give
minutes.
point of order,
Mr. Brock, just allow the minister to respond to the question. I know that we're on short timelines here, but please allow Mr. Boissonnault to respond to that. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I have no operational role in that company. I am not the Randy in the article today. And let me give you an example, Mr. Chair. I don't know why Mr. Brock received income from the province of Ontario while he's been serving as an MP, but I assume that he cleared that with the Ethics Commissioner in the same way that I cleared my business dealings with the Ethics Commissioner, and no investigation or evaluation of my business affairs will take place.
Mr. Brock, go ahead.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair. The question that Mr. Brock asked was well over a minute.
And the response was
No,
25 or
Well,
30
there was
I
a
think he
preamble, there
concluded.
was a question, yes or no.
think he
So I'll ask
concluded.
again,
Go ahead,
Minister.
Mr.
You're
Brock, yes.
laughing at the whole process,
No,
but Canadians are not laughing at you, and they're not siding with you. Did you reach out to Mr. Anderson this morning after you read the Global News report, yes or no?
I am not the Randy in that report.
Did you
The
call
articles
Mr. Anderson?
No, why would I call Mr. Anderson? I
Point
did
of
not
order,
know.
Chair. Point
So
of
the
order,
answer-
Chair.
Apparently,
Yeah.
Mr.
I cannot
Anderson
do
didn't want
that.
to
Mr.
provide
Brock,
the survey
Mr.
to
Brock,
Randy.
Under
Mr.
the
Brock,
ethics,
the
Mr.
answer,
Chair.
he
I
said
gave the
no.
answer.
He said no.
Chair,
Are you on a point of order?
Yes,
Mr.
I
Young?
am,
Go
Chair.
ahead.
Out of respect for our interpreters, and this keeps happening, people are interrupting.
I agree.
And it's so unfair to the
Okay.
people that work so hard for us.
Thank
so
you.
if we could please
Yeah.
just knock it
And
off.
I've made that very clear. Go ahead, Mr.
So,
Brock.
Randy,
You've got
so-
like literally 20 seconds, sir.
Minister, will you provide to this committee details of your text messages for all the phones that were in operation on September the 22nd, 2022, so that this committee can determine if you are in fact the Randy that the text messages are referring to, the Randy that the other partner wants to communicate with? Will you reach out to your service provider and provide us with details
Okay.
of your text messages on that day for all your devices?
Minister,
Yes or
quick,
no?
quick response, Minister, please.
Mr. Chair, I have no operational role in this company. I do not know who this Randy is. It is not me, and it's clear in the article that it's not me.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to take that as a request from Mr. Brock, and again, I'm going to ask the clerk to follow up on that request.
Point of
Mr.
order.
Housefather, you have 4 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Point of order?
Go ahead on your point of order, Mr. McKinnon.
I'd just like to observe that a request from a member is not the same as a request from the committee.
Well, we can follow up and ask, and if Mr. Boissonneau decides to submit the request from Mr. Brock, then he's capable of doing that. If he doesn't, then it's up to the committee to determine which direction they're going to go on this, and that could include up to moving a motion on the matter. So we can make the request. It's up to Mr. Boissonneau to either submit to the request or not. Mr. Housefather, you have 4 minutes. Go ahead, sir. Sorry, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister Boissonneau, do you know what the 28th most popular boy's name in 1956 was?
I do not.
Randy. You know how many Randys were born that year?
I do not.
28,000.
It's a lot of Randys.
A lot of Randys. Can I ask a question in terms of your business? You've been a businessman for the time that you're not in politics. When you earn income, does it always come all at once? For example, let's say you set up a client and you enter into a contract with the client, and they buy goods, and they committed to buy goods over a period of 2 years. Would it not be normal then that a salesperson or anybody who negotiated that agreement would be paid over that extended period, whether or not they remained with the company, given that they were part of that initial agreement?
That would be reasonable.
And so all of these bombshells that we've heard today, that there was a text message from somebody named Randy in Canada, shocking. The idea that somebody could be paid deferred income because they were part of a company and negotiated a deal and left the company seemed like shocking to me. Are they as shocking to you as they are to me?
After 20-some years in business, it's not shocking, and it is a customary practice. And the reason that it's important that we have a really strong ethics regime is so that a third-party neutral arbiter can look into those matters and make sure that they comply with the Act, which is exactly what I did, which is why the Ethics Commissioner said, no need to look into my affairs.
Understandable. Can I ask you, briefly, the question came up here, and I totally understand we're in Pride Month. How did it make you feel when a member of Parliament earlier this week said that he would vote against gay marriage?
Well, thankfully, we're in a different time, in a different place, where gay marriage is real, and I can tell you when that happened, it was one of the happiest days of my life. And I ran in part because I could see the country changing. But I come from a province that still struggles with recognizing to us LGBTQI people, and we have a long way to go. And this Conservative Party is not clear on the record as to how it would support trans people, gender non-binary people, LGBTQI people, and I have grave concern that a future Conservative government under Pierre Poilievre would suspend my rights using the notwithstanding clause in the Charter.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield my time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Housefather. That concludes our first panel for today. Minister, I want to thank you for taking the time to appear before committee. I'm going to suspend while we switch over and have the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner appear before us. Meeting suspended. Thank you. For today, our next panel is from the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. I would like to welcome the Commissioner, Conrad von Fichtenstein, and then the Director of Advisory and Compliance, Lynn Robinson-Dalpé. Commissioner, the floor is yours for up to 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Je vous remercie de m'avoir invité. Je suis accompagné.
I would like to thank you for inviting me. With me today is Lynn Robinson-Dalpé, Director of Advisory and Compliance. As we join you today, I recognize the weight of responsibility entrusted upon our office and the work of this committee. Our democracy relies fundamentally on the integrity and transparency of its elected and appointed officials and our ability to safeguard public trust.
It's within these principles and minds that I see the twofold purpose of the regimes we administer. One is to help public officials avoid and manage their conflicts of interest. And the second is to facilitate the movement of qualified people in and out of the public service. Qualified, competent, experienced people who are called to public service may well face conflicts of interest. That's not unusual. The issue is how to avoid and manage those conflicts and to protect the integrity of officials and the institutions they serve. Le ministre Boissonnault est un exemple de quelqu'un.
Minister Boissonnault is an example of someone who has moved in and out of public service and back again. Upon his first election as a member of Parliament in 2015, he complied with the Conflict of Interest Code for members of the House of Commons. He also complied with the Conflict of Interest Act when later appointed as Parliamentary Secretary.
2019 and 2021, when he was not elected or appointed official, he resumed work with Genex Catalyst Inc., which I shall call Genex hereafter, a company incorporated in 2000 in which he owns 100% of the shares. It is a management consulting company which gained a contract to lobby on behalf of the Edmonton Regional Airports Authority. The minister resigned as director of Xenex when he was re-elected and again became subject to the code as a member and subject to the act as a minister. Kirsten Poon became director of Xenex and continued to lobby in Xenex's name on behalf of the Edmonton Regional Authority until June 21. After that day, the lobbying was done in her own company's name, 2050877 Alberta Limited, operating under the name of Neves. Minister Boissonnault received no remuneration from Xenex after being elected and appointed minister. However, he disclosed to us that he was owed an outstanding business income from Neves. That amount was paid to Neves, paid by Neves subsequently to Xenex. Minister Boissonnault has 100% interest in 2256956 Alberta Limited. It in turn owns 50% of an affiliated company called Global Health Imports. His ownership of Xenex, his ownerships of 2256956 Alberta Limited, and his indirect partial ownership of Global Health Imports were all disclosed to my office. There is no disclosed evidence that the ownership of this company creates any conflict of interest. He complied with the rules under the Act and the Code. Compte tenu des informations que le ministre a
Considering the information that Minister Boissonnault has disclosed to the office, it appears he has complied with the requirements of the Code and the Act related to matters involving his companies, and consequently, there is no need to commence an examination. We are in the process of the usual annual review process with the Minister, and will be looking at all his updated disclosures with the office.
Mr. Robinson-Dalpé and I are here to answer any question you may have regarding the compliance process of the work and how we handle the file of Mr. Boissonnault. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We're going to start with our first round. And just for the benefit of committee, I did say I was going to leave a little bit of time at the end to discuss the question that was brought up at the beginning of the meeting by Mr. Baines. I am going to do that.